Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jenny from the Chopping Block. And tonight I'm honored to introduce you to Sorinne, who is going to be the next president of the United States of America. She's a presidential candidate. Her nickname is Healer in Chief, and she's a top contributor at Thrive Global. So, Sorinne, I just want to welcome you, and I just want to ask you what the future looks like for you and how you got inspired to run for president.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I am so honored to be here. And I'm not a top contributor yet, but perhaps, I guess it's relative. But I am a contributor for Thrive Global, and that is also an honor that I'm very grateful for. The future looks very bright to me. I am seeing a bright, sunshiny day ahead. And actually, it's very bright and sunny where I am today, so I'm also grateful for that. I'm excited to share and see where this goes today.
Beautiful. And we met actually, was it last Thursday? We met on the Unblinded event, and we were talking a little bit before the show how, our group was just the energy between us all was just amazing. And we found a lot of common similarities, you're from my hometown in Rockaway, right?
Far Rockaway. I was born in Queens, Far Rockaway. Yeah.
And my family is very political, and I grew up in politics, so it's just like a great fit. And we have similar missions, so I'm just grateful for you, and I'm so happy that you came into my vortex and I got to know you better. And now I'm interviewing on my show, which is awesome.
I just love the way the universe always conspires in our favor. It's just like everything that we need to succeed and to thrive in life, it's right there. We just have to be open to it, and we have to say yes.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And, so you were telling me earlier how this is it's been a calling, a vision of yours to run for president. And, we talked about how you're a contributor at Thrive Global, and you've published articles for the Huffington Post, and that led you to other experiences, and you're a delegate, which I didn't even know. And I've been in politics. I didn't even know what a delegate really meant. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Sure. So I will admit as well, I didn't know what a state delegate was until this year when I became one. And delegates are very important in the whole process of, who becomes president, because a state delegate gets to vote for who they want to appear on the ballot in November. Right. And ballot access is a really big deal. So only, parties like the DNC, the RNC, the LNC, the Green Party, I think in some states, they get ballot access. So delegates are people like you and me who raise their hands up at a convention and say, I want to be a delegate. And then they get voted in, at least in the LNC, because I was a libertarian before I decided to run as independent. And so I'm still in philosophy, I'm still libertarian, but that's another story. We can talk about that later. But I did get chosen to be a state delegate. And so I got to be a delegate and a candidate. So I got to see both ends of the spectrum. And, part of the reason I ended up running as independent is because I felt like the process lacked integrity. And I actually spoke with the Federal Election Committee about it a couple of times because I wanted to make sure that it was okay. And they told me, yep, the parties can choose candidates any way they want. It doesn't matter. There doesn't have to be any integrity to the process. And a lot of people don't understand this because we think that, as individuals, as voters, that our voices really matter. But actually, the delegates have a huge handle on that, especially there are different caucuses that will fund delegates, to go to conventions, to promote candidates, and to vote for candidates, essentially. So it's not a very level playing field in that regard, which was part of, the disappointment for me was to recognize, even in the party of principle, there are people who don't follow the principles.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioned that you went from being on the phone with the Department of Defense to coming on Unblinded. You're just it's amazing.
Yes. So that was the craziest thing. Before I got called and invited to be on Unblinded, I was being interviewed by somebody else who ran for president in the Democratic Party who works with the Department of Defense. She had reached out to me to interview me. And then I just wrapped up that interview and I get a phone call from somebody on Unblinded that says, hey, we got your phone number from a friend of yours. We've got a spot in 2 hours. Do you want to go on the show? I'm like, sure, this sounds interesting. I'm prepared for anything. Let's do it. And I had this amazing experience with you and the rest of the panel.
Beautiful. And I want to hear more about what inspired this journey for you. Like, I want to hear how it came to you, the vision, what brought you here.
Sure. So I'm going to try to put this together in a way that makes sense. I first thought about being president about 20 years ago. And I believe what really got me thinking about it was because I had grown up abused, basically from the time I was born till I was about 14. Every single day of those 14 years, I was hit and called names, and all kinds of horrible things happened to me at home. And actually, I ran away from home when I was 14. But as a young adult, I was really curious about what drives behavior. I got a degree in psychology, and I've gotten a lot deeper with that, with like neuroscience and epigenetics and hypnosis. And basically about 20 years ago, I was thinking, I don't want anybody else to have to go through what I went through. No innocent child, right? Because that's what children are, all innocent, do not deserve to be treated this way. And I thought, well, the only way that I can truly make that kind of an impact, which is essentially addressing values, right, is by being president. And the reason the president came to mind is because I realized the president is, in a way, a role model, right? The president gets this platform where the whole world is listening and paying attention. The president has the ability, and does actually, whether they want to or not, they set the tone for how we treat one another. So whether we agree with the president or not, the more we tune into the president, the more influenced we are by the president's behavior. And so I realized, okay, like I will be able to influence the media, I will be able to influence education curriculums, I'll be able to influence healthcare, everything from that position. So I realized, okay, that's where I'm going to have to go. But this was about 20 years ago, okay? I was, 19, 20 years old back then. So it wasn't like that serious, but I had this realization. And I went on with my life, kind of not thinking too much about it, but being very aware of how people were treating politicians, in the sense that, a lot of people around me were blaming politicians for their problems, right? It's always somebody else's fault. They never looked at themselves. They never thought about being the change, leading by example, stepping into public leadership themselves. And it was just really starting to nag at me. This is like building up. And I grew up really poor, welfare, food stamps, Section 8. I didn't look like most of the people around me in kindergarten and preschool, through 8th grade. Because I was really poor. I grew up in the projects essentially. And so I realized that, I needed to start being the change. I hit bottom when I was, 31 or so. I had very severe PTSD. Even though I had made it on paper coming from this very difficult place, I was still repeating this pattern from childhood of attracting abusive relationships in my professional life, in my personal life, in my romantic life. And I was in and out of ER when I hit bottom. And I got turned on to a philosophy of life, which I mentioned last week when we first met, called concept therapy. And it's basically looking at the concepts in your subconscious mind and reclassifying them as fact, theory, or fantasy. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey. And somewhere along the line, or early on, this is going to sound really weird, but it's okay. I'm just going to go with it. I was 33 years old and I was thinking about Jesus. And I was thinking about all that he had accomplished by that time. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm okay if that's my path. I don't believe that it has to go out like that we live in a day and age where, we're more civilized, where if I'm intelligent and strategic, I can be around for maybe 7 more decades. But around that same time, I had a vision come to me as well, and it scared me. And people were chanting Sorinne 2020. And I only told one person at the time. It was the first person I saw that day. It was somebody that was a mentor of mine at the time. And he used to kind of tease me and say, I should get a website, which I never did. He's Disciples of Sorinne, because he noticed I was very magnetic. But I had imposter syndrome because I was abused every day of my life, or those formative years. I always heard that I was ugly and stupid and all those other things.
So far from the truth.
So I kept this inside, except for with the one person. But then I started meeting more spiritual people and kind of sharing pieces of what I felt and saw. And understood about human behavior with people I knew. And other people started telling me they saw me as president. They saw me as leading people. They thought that I was courageous, that I had insight, that I would be perfect for this position. So I started to surrender to it. And I actually had a colleague that was also running for president. He dropped out now, that invited me to run as his vice president about 2 years ago. And initially I said yes, because I was still in the imposter syndrome slightly. But again, it was like the doors were opening, right? And a week later, I said, look, I love you. I care about you, but I've had this vision. I felt called for a long time. Like, I have to do it by myself. Like, my whole life, I've been a means to other people's ends. I've made so many other people successful. You know, this is a do-it-yourself proposition. Like, I have to just put myself out there, and like, whether I literally win or metaphorically win, you know, I'm going to free myself. I'm going to inspire others, and I have nothing to lose, because I am lifting other people up. I'm planting seeds. And again, like, if I'm president, the work doesn't stop then, right? It just makes it easier to reach more people, but it doesn't change my behavior. It doesn't change who I am, because we have a lot of work to do to educate people, to inspire people, to empower people, to heal people, to unite people, to free people, right? It's not going to happen overnight. I'm a realist. But, you know, even though I'm an idealist, there's a lot of pragmatic, you know, basis to where I'm coming from. So I hope that gives you a general idea of, you know, how I got from where I was to where I am now.
So beautiful. And thank you for sharing. It's so inspiring. I wanted to ask you, how did you get the nickname Healer in Chief, and how has that journey been for you? How did you discover that?
Sure. So back to the California State Convention, I really had a wonderful time there this year in February, meeting state delegates and meeting Libertarian Party members. And I've been doing essentially energy healing work for a long time. And people started gravitating towards me, and I was able to help them work through, you know, some of their physical challenges as well as some of their spiritual and psychological challenges. And somebody said, "You're the healer in chief. We need one." And I was like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to own that. And so I just went with it. And then the funniest thing, a couple months later, I think Nancy Pelosi said, "We need a healer in chief." And somebody's like, "Hey, they're tuning into your frequency." So I'm just rolling with this as organically as possible, which has been the most beautiful part of it. And I'm sharing because, you know, a lot of times we resist what we're called to do, what we're the most, you know, what we would actually thrive at. But it's like when you just surrender to it, all the pieces come together. It's like, I've never felt more fulfilled. You know, all those fears I had before, it's like, you know, nobody's perfect, right? I'm human. And if I can admit that, you know, I think that's actually going to help me connect with more people. You know, it's like, I'm not going to say I know all the answers. I'm going to connect with people who know more than me, right? Because nobody has all the answers and everybody is human. So I just share that because I want people to understand that we're all good at something. We all have gifts and inclinations, and that if we take that leap of faith, we will be immensely rewarded.
Beautiful. And there's a lot of heart surrounding us today in this call. Your background's a heart. What does it mean to you to lead with your heart?
Well, so I believe that ultimately we're all one. You know, there's just one life that animates us all. You know, some people call it God, some people call it energy, some people call it nature, consciousness, source. It doesn't matter what we call it, but if we recognize that we're all connected and that, you know, everything that I do affects everybody else, you know, even the thoughts that I have, because they vibrate at different frequencies, they affect the collective, the field, right? And so coming from a place of love is very essential. It's like, I keep getting these messages around me, you know, love wins. And that's it, you know, and it starts with self-love, right? Like so many, and that was my journey, and it still is, right? I'm a work in progress, and I always will be, you know, but every day I'm going to get better and better. And what I realized along my own journey, especially with having severe PTSD, is that I didn't know how to love myself because nobody taught me. I didn't have role models that knew how to love themselves either. And, you know, for many years, I've actually said that my purpose is to be, give, and receive love. And I believe that love, it doesn't have conditions, you know, because we are all one. I have to treat you like a part of me. It doesn't matter if you might do things that irritate me. I need to keep myself in check and realize that, everybody is on their own journey, right? And so when we come from a place of love, we're going to do things that ultimately benefit ourselves and everybody else. One of the things that I've been involved in for a few years now is called the conscious capitalism movement. And I bring that up because the model essentially is creating businesses where everybody wins, right? Like you're not just focused on the bottom line, and you actually end up making more money when you do things like because you actually want to add value and not just make money. So love is such a huge, big part of my platform because I realize that that's what the world needs. No matter how new agey it sounds or cliche it sounds, love is what we need to all master.
Beautiful. Oh, can you give me an example of one of those businesses that you feel like thrive by coming together and, coming from a place of love? I'm just curious.
I'm trying to think. Well, there is a company, I won't tell you I don't know the names of the companies off the top of my head, but BlackRock, they're a big investment company. And one of the things they've done is they will not look at a business plan anymore unless they're actually looking at the bigger picture of like sustainability and adding value, right? So they're one of the biggest like investment companies out there that conscious capitalism works with them. So I think they're on the right path, but don't hold me to it because I haven't looked at their portfolio and everything, but I know that they're trying. But like even like John Mackey, he tried, with Whole Foods. Again, nobody is perfect, but we can try better, right? And so that's one thing I want to mention is that as long as we're trying and we're conscious about it, we're going to get better. But at the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't know.
No, that's a great example. I wanted to hear a little bit more on like an example because I'm like, something to look up to, something to look, forward to.
And then we can also, create it, right? I'm sure there are others that are creating it that aren't as big as them. So that's also something to keep in mind. And going forward, people like you and me can create businesses, and we're planting seeds right now in this conversation.
Beautiful. And I want to segue into what we talked about earlier, because it's one of the questions that really I wanted to ask you, like how we as citizens could stand up and make the changes instead of constantly looking to these leaders that might not even align with like what we value, and like the strength in the numbers of like how we could actually make a difference.
Yeah. This is something, part of the reason that I resonate with the libertarian platform is because they're about small government. And along my journey this year, really educating myself in politics and understanding how things work, I realized, that the founding fathers of this country wanted a small government because they wanted freedom, but they also wanted to be personally responsible for their actions, right? Because we reap what we sow. And when government interferes in that natural process, we don't always learn what's good and bad. And so I'm kind of giving you a bigger answer here because I feel like we shouldn't rely on government to do things for us, right? We should be practicing the golden rule ourselves, and back to love. If we master loving ourselves, we know what love looks like for others, and we also teach others how to love us. Mm-hmm. So leading, for example, by example is really huge. And like as far as government goes, I view government as, we delegate to them to do things that we don't want to do, right? But we shouldn't be delegating everything to them, otherwise we become like little children. We need to take responsibility. Like one of my journeys of, going from being essentially paralyzed to being totally healthy now is learning to take responsibility for the bad choices, or not bad, but the choices I wouldn't make again, right? Mm-hmm. The poor choices, for example, because I used to be a victim. And it was easy, of course, like I was born into an abusive family, right? And then I kept repeating that, and I kept blaming other people for my problems. But when I started to realize, like, hey, I can change this, that my thoughts are attracting all these negative experiences in my life, that if I change my thoughts, I can attract positive experiences. And when I change my thoughts, I change the way I speak, and I change the way I act. So there's a lot of consciousness involved, right? There's a lot of awareness and discipline and will. And it's not easy at first, okay? it can be very painful, especially to realize like, wow, like I've been hurting myself all this time. You know, I was listening to an interview that I did about 4 years ago with somebody yesterday, a woman named Maggie Georgopoulos. She wrote a book called Up the Ladder in the Skirt, or Up the Ladder in a Skirt. And she's worked with women all around the world in countries where women aren't even allowed to be in the same room with men. And she was talking about how, you know, that these are excuses that we kind of have in the Western world. Like, you know, because she's seen women do so many amazing things in countries where they're not even allowed to be in the same room with men. So we need to stop making excuses essentially for why we're not achieving what we want in life, why the world isn't the way we want it to be. And we need to lead by example. You know, if you see some trash on the street, pick it up. Don't get upset at somebody else for littering. Like, this is our home, right? Or sit down and talk to somebody that is struggling. Like, I'll do this with homeless people. A lot of times I find that people that are homeless, especially in San Francisco, are people that have had really difficult lives that don't feel like they've been valued. And if you sit down with them and help them realize that they're good at something, that they matter, that they can overcome this, that they don't have it as bad as they think they do, that there are others that have it even worse, you can make a huge difference. But, you know, the thing that a lot of people I feel don't realize is that, you know, people pay taxes and they think, okay, my taxes should take care of the problems. No, money is not the answer. It's about love. And actually, one of my campaign managers came up with another, I have two slogans, but one of them is a big heart, small government. And that's really what I think we need, is we need more people to love themselves so they can love others. And we need to shrink the government, and we need to take our power back, our freedom back, because we are very capable of living in a peaceful and prosperous country and world if we're willing to do the work.
And I have a question for you, because I recently had like an awakening where I felt like I finally loved myself for the first time in like, honestly, like 20 years. And I can't put my finger on, well, I can, but it's like, do you have any advice for everyone out there, like to develop that self-love? Like, how does that happen?
Well, I had to hit bottom to get there.
Okay.
And I really hope that others don't have to go through what I went through. But it started with boundaries for me, because I realized that I was just saying yes to everything. I just wanted people to accept me, but I didn't accept myself. And so I had to start saying no to others and yes to me. Even, you know, I'm going to be very candid with you, like this morning, you know, or last night, we're talking about what time are you going to do this interview? And I wanted to just say yes to you the first time you gave me. And I'm like, no, I am loving myself. I need to set boundaries. I've had a long day. I don't want to do this first thing in the morning. Let's just see what happens, see if she's flexible. And sure enough, you were, right? So I got rewarded positively, and I also got to honor my boundaries. So little things like that. Something, you know, I think it's related. I hope people understand where I'm coming from, because I don't think I'm giving you a direct answer, but it's not intentional. It's, you know, it's a very deep question, but one of the things that I learned along my journey is that I used to trust unconditionally and love conditionally, right? And love with conditions is not love. And I switched it around where I trust conditionally and love unconditionally. And I feel like that's something that can help many people as well, you know, because a lot of times we believe things that aren't true because we're trying to make it fit our story, right? And this is where going with the flow is really important. Like, just to let go and let things come to you that are meant for you. Don't hold on to things. Don't try to force things to fit into your story, right? See things the way that they truly are. I hope that helps answer the question.
Definitely
Thank
helps.
you.
And it's given me inspiration, because I run a couple of like a women and a man's group on love and relationships. And I want to go over the topic of boundaries, because it's been, you know, I suffered from codependency. I'm still working through that. So I think it's so important to set those boundaries for you.
Yeah.
And I'd love to dive deeper into it.
Speaking of codependency, because I was an abused child, that's something I learned as well. And for a while, I actually went to Codependence Anonymous groups, and that was really helpful. Being around other people that had similar journeys that were working on improving themselves, right? Like being around people that are like you helps you, expedite your own healing journey to, feeling complete and loving yourself. So I recommend that because, even before COVID, they had virtual meetings, so I'm sure there's tons now and lots of people have free time. This is a wonderful time to invest in yourself, to develop yourself and to heal yourself.
Beautiful. Definitely. And peer-to-peer mentorship has changed my life, hands down. So I'm definitely in alignment with that. I have a couple of questions regarding, like, as president, how do you see our healthcare system going, and especially now during COVID? Like, do you have any visions of how we could do better?
Yeah. So before COVID, I had some very clear visions, and they're pretty much the same now. Because of my own journey, especially with, being in a lot of physical pain with spasms and ulcers and losing my voice, and going out to, Western doctors and specialists, the traditional healthcare route, and not getting relief, trying lots of drugs and having lots of x-rays and ultrasounds and lab work, and getting relief from actually starting to address my mind, right? Because with PTSD, I was stuck in a loop and I was creating all these physical symptoms. And that really opened up my mind to recognize that a lot of disease, and some people say anywhere from like 80% to like, 99% is functional, meaning, and this is going to be hard for some people to accept, it's self-created. We think ourselves sick, right? And so you could have a headache, you could have a migraine, you could have all kinds of physical disease that started with your thoughts. And so I'm really about addressing causes of disease and not symptoms, because if you take a drug or you have a surgery to mask a symptom, right, that energy is still within you. Your thoughts haven't changed. Your behaviors haven't changed. So you're going to create something else, right? And so you're not actually getting better. So I really want to, impact healthcare in the sense that we're looking at the entire being, not just the physical, not just the symptom, right? Like, why is this person in this kind of pain? So along my journey, I've gotten into neuroscience and epigenetics, and I've gotten to work with some of the most amazing people of our time, like Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Sue Morter, Dr. John Rady. And these are people that understand and look at the entire being. And they've also found, for example, that DNA is just a blueprint, that we can change it, that our environment makes a difference, right? And environment is also like, what are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you paying attention to? Who are you engaging with, right? Those things affect all of us. And so as far as healthcare goes, I really believe it's important for people to understand that one size does not fit all. There is definitely a time and place for traditional Western medicine. You're in an accident or, you're poisoned, something like that, right? But most of the time we create disease. And, like I said, it's hard for many people to accept this because it means you have to be responsible for yourself and you can't blame somebody else. But I believe more and more people are starting to come around to this and recognize this. And, I'm actually a chiropractic school dropout. I was going to be a doctor of chiropractic. I was magnetized and hypnotized by a very famous chiropractor, and I wanted to be just like him. And about a week into it, I was like, yeah, this isn't right for me. I'm here for all the wrong reasons. And I dropped out, and I realized, I have other gifts and I can help heal people. Yeah, I can help heal people with the gifts I already have by developing them. I don't need to be like somebody else to help people heal or to make a positive impact in the world. And so, and with COVID, I have a family member who has, for example, COPD, emphysema, and asthma, and they cannot wear a mask, right? And they don't go outside. They limit that, just to go to the grocery store, and they do put on a mask when they go, but they have a hard time breathing, right? But I feel bad because I think about how many other people are like that might actually have to go outside more often, and how people are judging them, thinking that they're horrible people when they just want to breathe, right? So for me, it's a very interesting place to be because I feel like we should mind our own business, keep our distance from people, right? But don't judge people if they're wearing a mask or not. Like, realize that and like this person I know, they didn't develop these issues until we started having fires in California in 2017, right? So it's not necessarily their fault, right? So there's so much that we needed. Some people say, oh, maybe they should have treated their bodies better. Well, if we're not treating our environment well, then people can become more susceptible. There's so many factors to this.
Yeah.
So I don't judge people. I mind my own business. I know that like fresh air is really good for us. We need oxygen to thrive, and I respect people's distance. I always have. And if I'm not feeling well, I'm not going to go out. And I think it's a great idea. Cover yourself up if you're not feeling well, and stay home. If you can.
Yeah, I feel like it just reminded me of a thought I have a lot. It's like, and I see, because I love people, and I love connecting with people and learning from people. And, even when it comes to like, say, driving, I always use the analogy, like, you never know what's going on in that person's car, why they might be driving a little crazy, or just to show them love instead of anger. And then like the other day, like a customer, like I always see this in this subculture of like, a customer is having a hard time and other people don't like that person. And it's like, do you know what that person went through? Like, and we all go through stuff. I get it. But like, just to give people grace, like, because sometimes if you actually know the story or why they're hurting, like it's impossible not to feel love towards them.
Yeah. That's so huge. Whenever I was going through severe PTSD, there were quite a few friends that abandoned me because they couldn't understand what I was going through, and I didn't feel safe to talk about it. And, I never held it against them, but I realized like it's and I've asked for forgiveness, and I said, I'm sorry, but I realized like it's harder on them because they've painted this picture of me that isn't true, right? Because of whatever their perception is, without actually like realizing like, hey, maybe she's going through a really hard time, and she doesn't want to talk about it, and that's okay. And that's actually really helped me to be a lot more compassionate and empathetic with other people, just recognizing what I went through. And so like, it's really easy for me to like, there's like nothing offends me anymore. I just try to come from a place of love because I realize it's not me,
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday, it was a miscommunication that somebody like thought they offended me, and maybe they did. It was a little inappropriate, but when somebody asked me, did that person offend you? I'm like, I don't think that's possible. Because
awesome.
Of course it is. I don't want to ask for it, knock on wood, but I'm just saying, like, I have a different perception of things now.
Well, also like when you know who you are and you own who you are, nothing can move you, and I think, and that's why like I've been studying, we haven't really talked about it. I've been studying natural laws and universal laws and basic principles since 2011. Well, that's, concept therapy essentially. And that's what's really helped give me the most peace and able to reason through things so that I'm not influenced by my emotions, because many of us, especially right now, are in fight or flight mode. And so we can't reason correctly, right? We're not relaxed. And when we're not relaxed, we don't make really good decisions. And so like learning how to reason, understanding life, it is the greatest thing that any human being can do for themselves, because you'll have peace no matter what.
Absolutely. And, I was in a workshop yesterday with Gerald Rogers, and he taught us like this practice. It's like this breathing exercise, like that he's transformed like couples' lives, friends' lives, because you want to breathe into that feeling. So you take five seconds away from the person before reacting. Like I feel like personally, I always reacted, like I was so impulsive, like I would always react in my feeling. But now, and the more I do work for myself, like I know to like take a deep breath, like recenter, and then make a decision. And I think that could change the world just with that.
Yeah, for a couple of years, there was a type of chiropractic care that I received called network spinal analysis. And I loved it because there's no cracking or anything like that or adjusting. You're just laying down, and the chiropractor touches like different bones on your body. They call them gateways, and they just open you up, and you're breathing into the spaces and you're releasing energy. And every time, like they call them entrainments, they're about like half an hour long. Every time I would finish an entrainment, I would be so inspired. I would just sit in the lobby and write, like all these things would just flow out of me. And so like when you talk about breath, I call it breath work, it's an amazing way to heal and to get rid of negative energy, to be present and to be inspired. And so many people don't realize like the power of just breathing, before you respond to something. Just like Eckhart Tolle is somebody I look up to in that regard. It's like he's always so calm. He's always so chill. I'm like, I want to be like him when I grow up.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's it's these little tools like, you just gotta practice and get better at, and it's hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a few fun questions. So where would your first international trip be, either for leisure or for business as president?
So I've done a lot of international for leisure trips as part of my healing journey, because I had to have my faith in humanity restored. And I think it's time to do trips for world peace. And so I feel like there are actually two countries I want to connect with first. And I've been to both China and Russia, because I feel like those are the countries that we really need to work on truly, building bridges with. And I would love to meet with the presidents of those countries and to just have heart-to-heart conversations with them to understand where they are, what they're trying to achieve, and help them to own their own solution that involves integrity for all. I really believe that, focusing on creating peace around the world would benefit everybody. And if we address the countries where we perhaps haven't had, the most friendly histories, that would be a great starting place and make it easier for us to create peace with other countries as well.
Beautiful. And what do you think, like, how do you think you could bridge those, that gap with us? Like what do you think would help?
Helping them understand how we're all connected and, understand why every human life matters and why freedom matters. My mother is actually from Russia. She left there in the 70s. My father is from Romania. He defected in the 70s for freedom. And so I really understand how much people are willing to risk for freedom. And I believe that if the leaders of those countries felt that it was, in their best interest to give people more freedom, that they would, not only be more fulfilled personally, but also as leaders, that they would see a change in the energy, a change in the culture in the countries. I'm not happy about what's going on in China, with the Uyghurs. That's not okay. And that's something that I really want to address, that people really need to be allowed to believe whatever they want to believe. My father was a musician. He still is. He's a composer. And the reason he ran across the border, risked getting shot by a guard, is because he wanted to compose music for God. And he wasn't allowed to because of his beliefs. Right. And so it's kind of in my DNA. And I understand how valuable it is to let people believe whatever they want to believe. And he always told me, it's nobody's business what I do in my square foot of space, as long as I'm not bothering anybody else. And I really believe that. And, I kind of joke lately with COVID, I get 6 feet of space now.
I love that. And, I was talking at a family dinner the other day, and we were talking about like our ancestors, our great grandparents, what did they do? And it's just really funny when you dig a little deep, like how everybody at the table, when we talked about it, there was a couple of families, who they are was inspired somehow, like indirectly, from who, the grandparents were. Like my mom's father's father was a judge. It's just like there's a bunch of correlations, and it's like so cool and interesting to think about that. So I want to ask you, I always ask every person that comes on the show, if you could have a superpower, what would that be? And I want to ask you that, but something's calling me to dig a little deeper and ask you, who's your hero? Who's been your hero in your life?
Well, I learned the hard way to not idolize human beings because we're all imperfect. But one thing that it's really helped me along my journey is like being able to find something positive and inspiring in all human beings. And so, back to believing we're all one, it's just the same life in different expressions. And so I am literally inspired by people that I see all the time, whether I agree with them or I don't. I can always find something positive from them that I can take with me. And even if somebody challenges me, I'll turn it around and make it into something positive, and that's, and I do that for my own sake because I really want to feel grateful, because I know that if I come from a place of love, that I'm essentially able to, get through to most people. And so, I don't idolize people anymore. I just think that, that there's something that we can learn from everybody. And that's really, I want to take that with me, for the rest of my days.
Beautiful. So if you could have a fun superpower, like a superhero, superwoman power, what would that be?
If I could just magically sprinkle love on everybody in the world, and we would all just feel inclined to practice the golden rule 24/7. Yeah, that would be it.
And I'm also going to ask you, my next question is a little different. I always ask everybody what their favorite food and or recipe is, but I want to ask you maybe a comfort food favorite of yours on the campaign trail.
Well, fortunately, most of my trail has been virtual, but my comfort food has been like fried chicken, waffles, and mac and cheese.
Chicken and waffles.
But I eat very healthy most of the time. I eat typically very vegetarian, but I do believe in eating everything in moderation. We've got to be able to adapt.
Beautiful. So what's your favorite healthy meal?
Well, so I do a vegetarian cleanse about once a quarter called the Inner Clean. And I make a broth with 4 ingredients, and then I season it with 4 ingredients. And it was just one of my favorites. I actually made it 2 days ago. It's kind of my way of supercharging myself whenever I feel like I need a boost of energy and I want to make sure that I got all the toxins out of me. I look at food as medicine most of the time, so I really I try to be conscious that I wasn't always like that. Like I said, I got my comfort foods.
Beautiful. And I'm with you on that. Like I could be totally vegan. The dogs are going crazy. Totally vegan, totally vegetarian. But like, then I'll be like, you know what? I want to eat a steak. Well, not all the time, but like whatever it is, it's like, that moderation, that balance. But try to be healthy for the most part.
Well, we're very fortunate that we live in a country where we have access to fresh and, organic produce without chemicals and so forth. But, some people don't have that. And sometimes when we're traveling, we don't have access to that. And so for me, it's like as much as possible, I want to put the good stuff in, but I also want to be able to handle other things, and be okay with it too. And recognize like it's still nourishing. It's really important just to have good thoughts about what you're eating. Like, don't beat yourself up if you're eating something that isn't necessarily healthy, because that's going to be a lot worse for you than eating something healthy and having bad thoughts while you're eating that.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier today when I was coming up with questions also like about world hunger and like small scale farming. I think there's a lot of growth in that for our country and the world.
Yeah. I did some research a few months because I was curious about our agriculture. And one of the things, from the government perspective is like, I want to get rid of subsidies because it's messed with how we eat. And, there's all these, like if you're a farmer and you want to sell your cow to somebody, you can't, but if you give it away to them, you can, right? It's like, as soon as there's money involved, the government wants to like regulate you and all these things. And there's certain, there's just a lot of business in it, and there's unsustainable practices because of the government interfering in it. And so I feel like that's something that more people need to be talking about, especially with farmers, because they have very difficult lives. They have actually very high suicide rates as well. And so, maybe another conversation, but yeah, like, this is again why I think that we need to shrink the government. We need to have more open conversations about everything that's happening in our country and in our world. And, especially with people that are on the front lines, that are, living it every day, that aren't biased. that aren't owned by some corporation.
Wow. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about education. Do you have a vision or something that you think could help with the things that are going on right now?
Sure. So kind of like I feel with healthcare, I believe that one size does not fit all. And like my own journey, I actually graduated high school in 2.5 years. And, my mom was actually really upset because she wanted me to be like everybody else. It's like, no, we're all unique. And I've just met so many other people that are brilliant and have done amazing things in their life that don't have formal educations. And so I believe it's really important to meet children, especially where they're at, and let them develop their natural abilities. Not all of us are supposed to be scientists or doctors or lawyers, and we can be very fulfilled living other kinds of lives. And, right now with COVID, I actually think it's pretty good that many people are getting into homeschooling because they're getting closer to their children, they're getting to know their children, and they're able to help their children develop at the pace that is healthiest for them. So I'm excited to see where we're going to go with education. But another thing that's been on my mind in that regard is that, I like free thinkers, not group thinkers. And I feel like typical schools encourage people to not challenge what they're being taught. And we should be free to, challenge information that comes our way, because we've learned time and time again that many things that we used to think were true in the past are not. That as we evolve in consciousness and technology, experience and so forth, we recognize that we've been imperfect. And so I think it's important to allow children the freedom to explore and to challenge things. And then another aspect of that, we kind of talked about it beforehand, is, I have a heavy background in psychology and psychiatry and hypnosis and programming, conditioning. It's all the same thing, essentially. And when we challenge ideas that come our way, we are actually protecting ourselves from being influenced with ideas that might not be good for us. So like when you're watching TV or listening to a song or watching a movie, you're not questioning it most of the time. You're just single focus. You're just allowing it to come in, and your brainwave activity actually changes. So your subconscious mind is wide open. This is like why advertising works in as little as 33 seconds sometimes. Crazy. And so if we teach children, and I say children because it's so much easier to start with children because you have a blank slate. The first 7 years of life, they're just taking everything in. So if you teach children how to reason correctly, how to question things, they're going to be, free thinkers. They're going to make better decisions as adults. I work with a lot of adults. That's what my work has been for the past several years. And it's possible for adults, and it happens all the time, but it takes more work because you are overwriting the original program. And so it's a lot more repetition versus when you have a blank slate, it just goes in and they accept it. And Beautiful. So, I really do want to improve education, or at least see it improve. I don't need to personally be the one to do it, but I'd like to be involved in that conversation so that people are actually learning things that help them thrive in life, not just survive or barely survive.
So beautiful. I'm definitely in alignment with that. And I think it's important to take that approach to education and just know that, there's a better way. There's possibly a better way. And my last question is if there's anything else you want to share that's on your heart, or maybe if there's something that you struggled with during COVID that you could help inspire the audience that's helped you.
Well, I just want to say that I love you, all of you, sincerely. And that's why I'm running for president, because I love my human family. And as far as, COVID goes, it's actually been fairly okay for me because I jokingly say I've been sheltering in place since 2011 because that's when I started to separate myself from the world. But I feel like, my biggest challenge has been with people who make generalizations. And, I feel like that's something that many of us get in trouble with, especially, I've had people on the right call me left and people on the left call me right. And I'm like, no, I'm in the center. I love all people. But it's just, we get in trouble when we make generalizations. And so back to what you said earlier about like taking a breath, I feel like before we're like, if we feel inclined to judge somebody, that we should take a breath and come from a place of love and realize that like everybody has a unique story. You know, everybody is doing whatever they're doing and showing up in the world the way that they are because of their unique story, and get to know them one on one instead of judging them and putting them into a group based on race or gender or practices or any of that stuff. You know, just recognize we are all unique individuals, and that, you know, together we're part of this beautiful puzzle, you know, and that if we can come together, if we choose to come together, that's when we will have really, you know, peace and prosperity everywhere.
Well, thank you so much. I love you. I love all of you. I'm grateful for you. And I've just really enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for inspiring me and the audience. And if there's anything I could do to help, or if there's any information that comes across that maybe I could share or learn from, I'd really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, so really quickly, I will say, if it's okay, if for my campaign, I am running as a write-in at this point. So if people feel that they are aligned with me, they are welcome to write my name in on their ballot. And for many states, it's actually going to count. So I'm excited about that.
Wow. Wait, so what do you mean many states it's going to count?
Well, there's the ballot access laws are not the same in all states, and even for write-in access, it's not the same for all states.
Oh,
So
I got you.
certain states I don't have to do anything, certain states I do. But you know, this is a movement. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just getting started.
Beautiful. Well, you have my support.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode, and I will see you guys real soon. Have a great night. Ciao.